Dude, she goes to horsepower matches. I'll come back to that. Bob's going to start the meeting.
We on mute?
I think mine's showing that he's on mute. The speaker's podium's on mute.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Can you hear me now?
Sally, when you were in Japan, did you see Tokyo Tower lit up?
Yeah, yes.
They lit it up for different seasons and different occasions. And from my
Right.
apartment,
In fact, I could see it out my hotel window.
Get this right.
It's really cool.
Good afternoon, Cary Rotary Club. Welcome to the friendliest and fastest growing in-person Rotary Club in District 7710. It's so great to have all of you here in person. We got 40 people here in person, another 8 online, so fantastic. Where's our Sergeant at Arms? Can I ask Howard Manning to please come and help us with the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance?
Let's bow our heads. Dear Lord, we come into your presence this afternoon with hearts of gratitude. We just thank you for how good you've been to us, how you've sheltered us and protected us, kept us well, kept us safe over this past 18 months. We thank you also for the opportunity that you've given us as Rotarians to continue to put service to others before ourselves, please you and show that we love you by obeying your commands to take care of our fellow men and fellow women. Now we thank you for this food. We thank you for all the little provisions that you made and continue to provide for us. In the name of Jesus Christ, your Son and our Savior, we do offer this prayer. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless America. Let stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans where you fall. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Thank you, Howard. Appreciate that. Stirring rendition. All right. Let us proceed. Can I ask Jim Lovejoy to please introduce our guests and visiting Rotarian? That'd be great.
Okay. Sal Camerata has a whole bunch of guests.
I've got several, so please hold your applause. A friend of mine, Jim Scottson. Jim's in the real estate business. Greg Richardson, formerly of GE Aircraft, and the wife of our speaker, Esther Dill.
Well,
We have one questionable visiting Rotarian. We love to see him, and he comes a lot. Thank you for that warm
honorary membership. All right. Well, the main item of club business we have is that you may recall, we had our colleagues come and advertise pig picking. That'll be happening. The pig picking in the park that is sponsored by the Cary Kildare Club. Chris Walker will tell you, the club honored us with a foursome in our golf tournament coming up. And I'll share with you that we honored them with a participation in the pig picking. So we have the rare, only once a year opportunity to provide tickets, discounted tickets, to the Rotarians here in the room and online to attend the pig picking in the park. It's going to be next Thursday night, August 5th. It's at Ritter Park, which is just opposite Lockmere, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And they've got several scholarships and humanitarian projects. They do the same thing with their fundraising money that we do with ours. And so we've already made the choice to support the club and their fundraiser. Now you have a choice to support your own stomach and have some really good barbecue. So the face value of these tickets, I believe it's priceless value. For IRS reporting services, it's $15. We're prepared to offer participants of our club these tickets at a discounted rate of $10 each. So who'd like to take a couple? I will take two.
Okay.
These are limited number, limited edition tickets. Two for Don Finkbeiner. Two for Camille. Jim's taken two. Thank you, Jim. Chris Walker has two. Does anybody online have an interest in these tickets to a delicious pig picking in the park, guaranteed sunshiny weather? Anyone else? Howard, thank you. Howard Manning is asking for a couple too, Jim, when you have a second. We're just tracking them. Uh-oh, don't run out. Fantastic. Thank you all for supporting this.
Also, if you haven't been to Ritter Park, in it is the Rotary Pavilion, which was built by the Rotary Club, and the barbecue is being served in the pavilion. You drive back to the park and you see it in the back, and or you can also pick up. You don't have to eat it there. You can pick it up. Take it out. Anybody else?
Renee has two for Paul. Renee? Fantastic.
I got two left.
You got the last two. Who'd like to have the last two?
If you don't have the money with you, you can pay all. We have the names.
Ken time up. Oops, or did Tim? Tim took them? Ken, we'll get you some tickets. If you want tickets, we'll get them for you. Fantastic. Thank you all. And while you're standing, Jim.
If somebody really wants to, we'll have. Anybody else?
I'll get you two, Ken. Jim, while you're don't sit down yet, Jim. Jim Lovejoy. Oh, before you get to that word, can you stand for just a moment? I want to recognize you. Recognize you and your beautiful wife, Betsy, and congratulate you for your upcoming wedding anniversary, which you'll celebrate on Friday of this week, if my information is correct. Congratulations. After last week's fiasco with John Ogle and Shirley, I was a little questionable on how many years it would be. If you see Carolyn Wasdell, congratulate she and Eddie on their wedding anniversary, which will be the 29th, Thursday. So congratulations to them. And I want to recognize one other person celebrating a Red Letter Day on Friday, July 31st. It's actually our Red Letter Day. But Bill Zidek will be celebrating his second anniversary with the Cary Rotary Club on Friday, July 31st. That leads off the 40 years that Bill had been a member of Rotary in other locations. So Bill, we're so glad that you're here with us. Chris, did you need to give any update on the golf
The only
tournament?
update is we're up to 14,360, and we got 64 dollars. So that's
Right.
75.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Fantastic. So you got one more, 65. You got 10 to go. Yep. August 30th, 10 a.m. here at the Gregor. So look forward to a fantastic event, and we're already off to a great money start.
Tell them how easy it is to pay.
So I'll give them the card, you can sign up, pay.
Yep. Great online.
Oh, we're gonna put it on too.
All right. Any other business for the club? This is rapidly spinning out of control. Any other business for the club? All right, well, with that then, I will call on Sal Camerato to introduce our program speaker today.
Thank you, President Bob. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. Mark Dill is a former telecommunications executive who turned a personal passion into a business and is author of the book, The Legend of the First Super Speedway. Mark spent 31 years in telecommunications with AT&T, Nortel, and Blue Cross. While at Nortel, Mark arranged an IndyCar sponsorship, winning the 1997 Indy 500, where he got a swig of milk in the victory circle. Mark has also worked as marketing and public relations vice president for Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Mark founded Mark Dill Enterprises, Inc., and operates the largest auto racing history website in the world. Mark is a graduate of Indiana University and received his MBA from San Jose State University. Mark and his wife Esther are longtime residents here in Cary. Please join me in welcoming Mark Dill.
Thank you, everyone. It's delightful to be here with you and get the opportunity to talk about my book and hopefully answer some questions afterwards. Get the slideshow up here. So the title of the book is The Legend of the First Super Speedway, and the subtitle, The Battle for the Soul of American Auto Racing.
I'm just going to move this so our people online can see you.
Very good. Hello, everybody online. Okay. So we go to the next slide. What I wanted to do, because I felt like this needed a narrative because I wanted to put readers there, but I was also very religious. I am a historian, very religious to the facts. So I want everything to be very accurate. So it straddles those worlds. And frankly, there were times as I got to know the characters by reading about them, and every character in it was a real living human being. I felt like I was able to get in their heads. I knew what they would say in certain situations. And so it's really an untold story. And that's why I thought it was important to bring it to light. Obviously there's nobody around that was around back then. And trying to describe it from a firsthand basis just isn't possible. But by going through a lot of records, newspapers, and I've talked to some other people that had met some of these characters earlier in life and got to know them. So the two protagonists in the book are Barney Oldfield and Carl Fisher. I'm curious, how many people have heard of those two guys? Right. Got a few. We're not all gone yet. So Barney was like the first superstar driver, and Carl, among many, many things, founded the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He also built Miami Beach, but that's another story. What I found, and it was something that I found as I moved through all my research, it wasn't anything I expected, but it really, what was going on, and this gets into the battle for the soul, there was a cultural divide. And in fact, as I thought about it, it really was instructive to thinking through the divides that are in our country today and how they stem from a culture that's been with us generations upon generations upon generations. So on the East Coast, especially in the Northeast, there were people like William K. Vanderbilt. I'm sure you've heard that name, William K. Vanderbilt Jr. And he was actually a pretty good race driver, but he was an amateur, and he founded the Vanderbilt Cup, and he was among the wealthiest men in the world at the time. And he headed up the American Automobile Association and was on their board. And they were in the Northeast. So there was this Northeastern view of the world that celebrated the amateur, and they weren't too keen on professionals. Those were of a different social class. And so they primarily focused on Long Island, where the Vanderbilt Cup race was. Other circuits along the East Coast, but down to Ormond Beach and Daytona Beach, which are roughly 7 miles apart, where they had annual speed trials. And they would try to set the world land speed record there. And so it was a culture of what they call gentlemen operators and professionals. So the professionals are kind of uncouth. They're not, you know, they made their money themselves. So Barney, as I said, is one of the main characters, and he's just a outrageous figure. And I've had people say they really enjoyed the book for its humor. And in just trying to depict these guys, I realized this is funny. I mean, the things they would say, they wouldn't be politically correct today. There's a lot of women that would be absolutely offended by these people, but they were living in a different time. And Barney thought, again, getting back to professionalism, he thought, well, I should be able to make money doing whatever I want. And he didn't particularly like the AAA establishment. They were always clamping down on him, and they wanted to take a bite out of his business. Like, I'm the guy, I'm the reason they're showing up. Why do I need you guys? So he would do what they call barnstorming races. And that was always putting him at odds with the governing body. And they banned him a couple of times. They called what he did outlaw racing. And it was scorned by a lot of people as being just pure entertainment and fake racing. And to some extent, that's true. He felt that it was a dangerous sport, and he wanted to control the situation as much as he could. And so he put on a show for what a lot of people call weed vendors in an agrarian society, farmers out in the countryside that had never seen a car before. And so they would be amazed and weren't too worried about, was this all according to Hoyle, if you will. And they just wanted to see cars go fast and get this sense of danger or excitement, which was all, hyped up as much as they could. So I think I covered that. Dangerous times, and there were. I mean, there was no safety equipment, not even seat belts. A lot of people lost their lives. This is a pen and ink editorial cartoon where you see Barney on the far left. Behind this Grim Reaper is a gentleman by the name of Earl Kaiser. And then on the nearest to us is Webb J in the white sewing machine steam car racer, which was blazingly fast. And they all three had bad accidents in the year this was published, 1905. And Jay and Kaiser both had career-ending injuries. They all survived, but those two guys had to drop out. Barney got through his okay and continued on for one of the longest careers of the era. My wife insists that I should read an excerpt. This might be a good time to do that. And it describes an accident that Barney had early on in his career. The constant bouncing slammed his teeth together and chips broke off in his mouth. Oldfield gripped the steering wheel as if its hard oak wood could ooze between his fingers like clay. Forget control. Now he just struggled to hang on. The pump slammed into the fence, shattering boards into splinters and knocking down posts like matchsticks. With a soft thump, the Winton hit a dark object, but nothing made sense as Oldfield tried to sort out images that looked like a man flying in the air and toppling downward. The absurd blob briefly rode atop the big red, creamy red Winton's nose and then fell underneath. The racer thumped and hopped as pieces of the machine broke off around him, flying with the fence splinters in a tornado. Now his car was cascading downward, picking up speed like falling from the ocean. Oldfield froze, his hands locked on his wooden wheel as he took an interminable ride of launches into the air and slams back against the earth. Surreal sounds of the car's wood frame snapping and crackling filled his ears. Beyond the track, Oldfield couldn't believe where he was. Downward he rode his bucking beast as another fence appeared, and he punched through it like it was paper mache. Horrified, Oldfield saw a large rock flash into his path, and he braced himself. His eyes closed as a sudden powerful jolt ripped the steering wheel away and launched him into feeling insignificant. Sensations came and left quickly as something new and terrible was happening to him faster than he could think. He thumped to the earth, eyes closed, his body became a cocoon. From the darkness of his mind, he couldn't tell what was happening to him other than he was being scraped, poked, and stabbed. Tumbling downhill, shrouded in darkness, Oldfield finally had a sensation that lasted long enough for his mind to process. Incessant, probing scrapes tore at his skin. Grasping at the straw he was mowing through, he felt it rip through his hands and slice his skin. Mercifully, at long last, everything stopped. So that kind of, at least to give you a flavor for the writing, and I think I keep that energy up through the book, if I don't say so myself. But main point is, this was a dangerous time, and frankly, there was a lot of media, newspapers of the day, that were calling for the end of the sport, outlaw, which is kind of the point of that cartoon. So as time progressed, and I wanted to paint this picture of all of the developments of the sport, what was going on, and it literally was the Wild West. A lot of things were disorganized, and the AAA, to their credit, was trying to make sense of it all. And because there were just no roads, in 1903, 1904, there were only about 200 miles of paved roads in the United States. Everything else was cow paths, rugged, craggy roads of mud and rocks that the wagons, the farmers would take their crops to market. So racing on those, and sometimes they did, and that's what they did at Long Island, but that was really rough. And Carl Fisher, who I mentioned earlier, he was a patriot. He really was. He was adamant that we got to do something. and he'd get really frustrated. He was not a patient man. He was pleading the government, he was pleading to Henry Ford and the rest of the automotive industry. We got to do something or the Europeans are going to tell us what cars we have to drive. And so because there were no public roads, he felt there needed to be some kind of a speedway where the manufacturers could come and just cut loose and really test their equipment. And at that time, there were about a dozen major car companies in Indianapolis alone. So he had this idea of building a speedway. They opened it in August 1909. They had motorcycle races. They had the first car races. And on the weekend of the car races, 5 people lost their lives. And 2 of them were spectators. So you can read about it, but it was a devastating weekend. And in fact, the lieutenant governor of Indiana tried to urge the state legislature to outlaw the sport in Indiana. So they were on the precipice. So what did they do? They decided they were going to pave the track with bricks. And this is a shot I love, which is during that process, and you see all these bricks, and they're staged for the laborers to come and place them. And so there was a total of 3.2 million bricks. And it was the state-of-the-art paving of the day. And we would think it was very rough, but back then it was a heck of a lot better than these roads with cow paths and what have you. So anyway, the locals started calling it the brickyard even before all the bricks were laid. And the whole goal was, we want to make this thing safer, because one of the big problems with the accidents was the cars were digging ruts into the track, and then it would twist the wheel and cars would want to turn over and so forth. So I want to avoid that. But also, it was really important to say you had the fastest speedway in the world or in America. And with Carl, even though you knew you didn't have the fastest speedway in the world, as long as you had the fastest speedway in America, you were going to say you had the fastest speedway in the world. He was a promoter. And concurrently, Old filled out with his shenanigans, but because of all the barnstorming and the animosity he built with the AAA, there were a lot of people that were hugely critical of him. And they thought he was a phony driver and that all his races were fixed, and they just didn't have a lot of respect for him. And it dug at him. He had an ego, and he was a competent driver. And so he decided, I'm going to buy the fastest car in the world, and I'm going to go set the world land speed record. So he bought a car known as the Blitzen Benz, and from an New York importer, and ended up driving it at Daytona in March of 1910, and went almost 132 miles an hour, which, you know, if you look at this thing, yeah, it didn't even have a drive shaft because the metal of the age wasn't strong enough to handle the torque thrown off of a 200 horsepower engine. It would just twist it. So they were using chain drives. Yeah. So that's a brief overview. You can find my book at markgdill.com, or it's easy to remember Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Target and Walmart. And I got a note one day, an email, that just really pleased me. It was like, I never heard of this outfit before, but apparently they're very prominent in England. And if you are from there or visited there, you might know the name, Blackwell's. And they picked up the book, and I was like, this is great. And I've had people contacting me from several countries in Europe, and they purchased the book, they have questions, etc. So that's my plug on that. I also wanted to mention, I've got this companion, I've got the website, and Sal in his kind introduction noted that it's really the largest, composite of pre-1920 auto racing first-hand information. He said I worked at Blue Cross. I ran their intranet, and I know that my site has more content on it than their site. So I've been doing it since '08. So and I've also got a Facebook and a Twitter Facebook page, First Super Speedway, and a Twitter handle, First Super Speedway. I've got a YouTube channel, and the little insignia down there is something, again, I lifted from a microfilm from a 1905 trade journal. I just thought it looked like, oh, it's a cool piece of art. And I often think, I have no idea who sketched that. And certainly they have no idea that in the 21st century, there'd be some joker like me using it. Yeah. Oh, and my wife, stand up, model that for me, you know.
We also have a new merchandise line.
Yeah, you can find that on markdill.com. So in closing, another thing we're doing, we have a newsletter that we put out. If you have an interest, text FSS Legend to 2282, and you can subscribe to the newsletter. And we put that out once a month, and I'm pretty proud of that. And I have to recognize Esther. She keeps me pointing in the right direction. She designed the website, and designed the newsletter, and helped me a lot with publishing. You designed the book, yeah. So I couldn't, honestly, I couldn't do it without her. Not because I wouldn't have the time, but I'm just not that bright. So, yeah, well, man on the back.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay. Besides the, I'm under the brickyard, the NASCAR.
Yeah.
Is it used for anything else during the year?
Well, it has been. They used to run MotoGP there, and I worked there, and frankly, that was a huge mistake. I could go down that path, but I won't. But you'll see, for example, Greg here has raced there. His vintage stock car, the Sports Car Vintage Racing Association, I expect they're going to be back next year. They've also had the SCCA runoffs. They do other special events through many days throughout the year, but they also run the Indianapolis Grand Prix, which is in Indy cars, but on the road course. So they've got 3 big race weekends a year.
So who actually owns?
Roger Penske, he just bought it. He just bought it last year. At this point, the family, the Hall and George family had owned it since 1945. I think you were.
Yeah, when they were running the world's fastest times on Daytona, were they literally straight line right down the beach?
Yes. And I'll note that I learned that the sands in Daytona and Ormond, if you talk to the people in Ormond, they don't like you to say it was Daytona. They call themselves the birthplace of speed, but those sands are very unique. The mix of granite in the sand actually makes it really hard. And I'm probably most of you been down there. And when the tide recedes and the sun has a chance to bake it, it's as hard as concrete. And they discovered it and they called it a speedway. They actually used that term. Yes, sir.
When they were barn strong before they had bricks and stuff like that, how fast were they going back then?
Well, the big thing was to say you ran a mile a minute. And most of these horse tracks were a mile or less. And in fact, Barney was the first person to turn a lap at 60 miles an hour on a closed circuit. And that contraption he drove was like Henry Ford's first race car in a wood frame tiller bar, not a steering wheel. The engine was had no oil pan. And they had oil sight feeders, glass vials, sounds like you know what. And $9.99, very good. And they named it, actually Carl Fisher named it, just threw that out to him. But that was a New York-based locomotive that had gone over 100 miles an hour. So they wanted to associate the car with something big and fast and powerful.
In Hillsborough, there's a track that looks like nature's taken over. Now it's what kind of track was that? And for what time period was that?
Well, yeah, I've been out there.
You can walk it now.
Yeah, you
It's
can- we
some kind of
walked it.
greenway or something.
Yeah, we walked it. Took my little grandson out there. He loves cars. And, you know, I don't know how much NASCAR was in on that, but there were just a lot of
Oh, that was NASCAR.
local stock car guys, you know, and they just get out there and lean on each other, and have fun. But yeah, that's a cool thing to see.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I'd like to.
Yeah,
I was
you
just
should
wondering
go
from what
see it.
time
They-
period it was.
It's 1930s, 40s, 50s. And they have a couple of the old race cars. They're just sitting there rusting, but it's part of the charm. It's a funky kind of museum, really.
Thank you.
Online, one of our, Rod Brooks is asking sort of along those lines, do any of the characters in your book have interaction or influence over the racing history in North Carolina, like bootlegging, et cetera?
No, I mean, that just wasn't part of that time period. The closest connection I have to Southern racing is the Daytona. But as I say, it was about road races in the Northeast, Daytona, and then eventually Indianapolis and the horse tracks. Yes, sir.
Just want you to know we were bootlegging before you ever had cars.
Yeah, well, I'll have to go research and write a book about bootlegging.
Sounds good.
When did the Europeans get involved and how did that influence racing in the Indianapolis?
Well, that's a good point. The reason for the Vanderbilt Cup that William K. Vanderbilt Jr. set up, and they called him Willie K., was he had raced over in Europe. He received classical education, and we did a lot of travels over to Europe. So if you can imagine him and Barney, you know, we're talking about some guy ultra sophisticated, and they race against each other. And Barney beat him down at Daytona, yeah. So when he set up the Vanderbilt Cup, the whole idea was to try to demonstrate to the Americans, not unlike what Carl Fisher was saying. You better pay attention. These guys, and they were so much further advanced than what the Americans had. In fact, Willie K drove a Mercedes. He set the world land speed record at Daytona in a Mercedes. And so they were on almost from the get-go. What was interesting too, and I'm going to go on, but like Carl Fisher wanted them to come to Indianapolis, but it was like that extra, link or extra step they'd have to go to get the trains to take their cars that far west, and they just like, So it wasn't until about 1913 that they came over, and in that race they were dominant. Jules Vue and a Peugeot really was unstoppable. So even then, it's always been that. You know, I mean, the Americans are more sports performance cars, the Europeans and Americans have always traditionally been about muscle. So you had NASCAR and you had drag racing.
Do you know why nobody in motorsports is in Rotary? You know why nobody in motorsports is NASCAR? It's four-way test.
What's that?
Nobody can pass a four-way test.
Mark? As a fellow Hoosier at Ball State graduate, thank you very much for joining us today. In appreciation, we have some note cards from Jerry Miller, our resident artist here.
Okay, excellent.
So thank you for joining us.
If somebody wants an autographed copy, it's like what, $20 a pop, and be happy to sign it.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate your sharing your expertise. It's always interesting to me how much the present is like the past. You know, all the talk you have about controversy and people, rivalry not getting along. sports being too dangerous. It all sounds the same, doesn't it? But thank you for being here to join us and share your research and passion for racing. All right, well, for next week, we'll have a special program that really relates back to our own club and what's happening here at home. Rod Brooks will lead us through a conversation about the updated strategic plan that was created by, drafted and intended to be implemented on your behalf by the board. So Rod's going to share with us some of the principles and objectives, and it's a great opportunity for all of our membership to get engaged in the plan and in the work that's actually going to get some of those things accomplished. So we'll look forward to having Rod with us. In 2 weeks, our district governor, Angela Bendorf Jameson, will join us on August 10th. Always an important date in the calendar of the Rotary. And I'm really excited based on the short time that I've known Angela, that she's going to come with a lot of energy and passion, but also a lot of commitment to helping us get done what we want to get done as a club. So please put that meeting on your calendar. The meal next week, I was thrilled today to see that there was pork served, because that makes me 1 for 2 so far this year. I'll put myself out there again. The scheduled meal for next week is salmon salad with mixed greens and a dill dressing. So we'll look forward to all of that. I want to thank Esther, Mark, Greg, your guests, Sal. Really appreciate you having them with us today. We're glad that you could join us for our companionship and fellowship. I hope that you'll have an opportunity to come back and join us again. And so with that, I'll ask Renee Spell if she can lead us out in the 4-way test.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?